Hello, friends. Thank you for joining yet another episode brought to you by Share the Well. It is a joy of mine to talk to Joby and Lydia. And Lydia I've not known. Joby I've known for almost 15 years now. We met when we were in Bangalore. Lydia is Joby's dear wife, and Lydia happens to be from the US, and Joby happens to be from India. And they have 3 kids, and they live in India. And it was wonderful to catch up with them and have a conversation about life in general and their relationship and how it shaped up over the years, and how they met, and how they prioritize God and how they look at family, and the sacrifices that they have to make, the learnings that they've had. I can go on and on, but I'd rather have you guys listen to the conversation. It was wonderful to catch up with the two of them. I was blessed wonderfully with that conversation. It was wonderful to hear both of them, and you guys will enjoy as well. Strong relationships in the family form the foundation of the future generations and of society. And it's really wonderful to hear this couple. So take a listen, enjoy, and I will talk to you guys end of the episode. I was reading an article, and I'm following a guy called Andy Crouch. Have you heard of that guy?
Yeah.
Andy Crouch. I will send you his article after we speak today. He works in a company called Praxis Labs. Very nice. Joby, you love him from how to approach business redemptively.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, really cool. At work, how do you be redemptive?
Yeah.
And so he was talking about this thing of compression, communication compression, as he calls it.
Mm-hmm.
What did he say exactly? I've written it down, hopefully. I don't know where I wrote it down, but he talks of compression.
Yeah.
Like if you meet person to person, he says millions of cues,
mm-hmm.
like body language, facial expression, and you are responding to a person face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get on to video, it like drastically brings it down. And if you get down to audio, it brings it down even more. Right. So it's fascinating to see. So he was saying how we have lost out without actually knowing what we have lost out because of this crisis. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I'd be interested to read that. Can I give a little caveat before we actually start?
Please.
I just wanted to inform you, but
and
not the audience.
This is off the record.
Yeah, off the record. I actually went to India with a missions organization, but now because of I'm on an OCI and I don't want to compromise that, I'm going to leave that very specific detail. Just
no problem. Yeah, we don't have to talk about it. I think this is going to be very. We can kind of not missional. We can say relational. Focus on you both.
Yeah. She said that also because when she's talking about things, she might not name any organization or any of that.
We don't need to even go. Actually, we don't even need to go there. Actually, to be honest with you. Cool. I think your personal journey and your personal journey, together, right? And we spoke about those 4 pods that we have. One was worldview. We can talk about that. I think it's fair to talk about that.
Yeah, we can go with the question that you mentioned. This was just
you're good with that?
Disclaimer. Yeah, totally.
Just that small
right.
Just the disclaimers that we will not be mentioning.
Yeah, and by the way, we can cut, right? So we also have the privilege of editing, right? Okay. So which our audience will not know, right? So. We can always edit. If you guys think that I don't know if I let something out by mistake, we can always edit that, right? So for your own safety. In fact, when I spoke to John's, you met John's before? Yeah. So John's was on last night. That's why we had to push it out. So John's and Jeremy were on last night. So they work with sensitive communities. So they were very careful about what they spoke about. And we focus primarily on their journeys, their call, and what they were going through. So we'll focus on that if you guys are okay with it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So first of all, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you guys taking this time. So Lindsay was very persistent. She's like, Joby and Lydia are in the US. Get their time. When they come back to India, they'll be busy. So get them now. You're in the same time zone. And Abhilash as well was kind of, pushing, and that's how Joby and I got in touch. And it was great to have you guys.
Thanks for this, Donald. And I know that Lindsay told me this sometime back, but it just got pushed out. But I'm glad
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are in a different context, so it's wonderful to have you guys in this context. And let's talk. So I always ask, our guests to introduce themselves. So maybe briefly, both of you take turns to introduce yourself and how who you are and what a little bit of your journey has been till now, and maybe even together.
Sure. Understand. Okay, sure. So to give a brief background, I grew up in a Christian family. My dad he worked with the central government of India, so he got transferred quite a bit, because of which we moved around India quite a bit. Initially, honestly, did not like it at all, because you don't stay in one school for a while. You just make friends, and then you hear that you're going to move to another place. So, but in retrospect, I'm very grateful for that, because I feel over time I can just meet somebody, have a good friendship with them, and kind of adapt to situations quicker than what it would have been if I was just stuck to one place. So we were in Mumbai, Cochin, Bangalore, Delhi. When we got married, I was based out of Delhi, but we got married in Bangalore. And then in 2018, we moved base from Delhi to Bangalore, and we are based out of Bangalore now. Yeah, I'll pause there, let Lydia talk, and then we'll get moving from there.
Sure. I actually grew up in the Philippines. My parents were doing work there, and so we moved back to the US when I was in middle school. And I suppose in some ways I come from a typical American family, but in other ways now I'm starting to realize we're not so typical. But so I grew up, like my mom and dad have kind of discipled me into the faith, is the way that I like to talk about it, because they were very intentional about teaching us at home and about the word and living it out. And once I started college, like I moved out of my mom and dad's house and like kind of was faced with the reality of life. And the Lord was really gracious through a period of, I suppose you could say, doubting or coming into my own of the faith. I got involved in a church where they were really, they were faithful to the word, but they were also really intentional about reaching out to community. So I got involved with international students on campus. And that's kind of where I started thinking about what would it be like if I didn't do the typical get a job right out of college and start on my career and meet a guy and get married. So I signed up for a program that sent me to join a team, and that happened to be, in the sovereignty of God in Bangalore. And that's how we met. I started going to a local church there, and we were involved in the same things. I had not the slightest intention of ever marrying an Indian. But again, in the word's sovereignty and in his goodness, like we're married now.
Yeah.
That's a very short version.
Yeah. And I'll try catching up with what Lydia mentioned. So my journey of faith, well, all those started when I was about 10 years old, where I, lifted up my hand and said that I want to follow Jesus. I wouldn't say that was not true. I think that was true to an extent, but I would say my what it really meant to follow Jesus uh, got clearer to me when I was about 15 or 16, when I realized how hopeless and how helpless in sin I am, and I can't do anything about it. Like I can just decide to stay at home and not talk to anybody and not do anything and still sin, right? So that dawned on me later on, and that kind of started that journey by the Lord's grace. And and the Lord was very gracious to really, even at church, even though some of the churches that I've been to have been very legalistic, so to say, but some of the folks my age and slightly elder to me were people who really would dive into the word and then debate things, argue things, and that got me really serious into uh, understanding the faith a lot more. And then I was also blessed while in college to be part of a group that Donald, you know of, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where I would say, very gifted to just learn the word, have spiritual friendships, which I have grown over time to realize it's one thing to have accountability relationships and fellowship, but it's a whole different thing and a very valuable thing to have spiritual friendships that you can harbor in your life with with a few people, not a lot of people, with a few people. And I think that journey, though I have fallen many times, the Lord has been gracious to just continue that journey for me. And yeah, I've just been growing since 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 that time. And then yeah, so while I was there was one time when I decided to go to a particular church because of a friend of mine who wanted to go to church, and he would go to church only because only if I was going. So it kind of became like, okay, I need to go to that church so that he would come, and that happened to be the church Lydia started to go to, and that's
That's
where
crazy.
Lydia and I had a very
It was very
formal relationship till the time she had to go back. But I had been praying for her for about 7 months before she left India, and she didn't know about it. And to a point where I was moving to Delhi, so I thought this is where the Lord's leading me, where we are not going to get married, and I was fine with that. In fact, there was a point when I prayed for somebody like her, but maybe somebody from the Malayali context, so that there's not a lot of drama going on and all of that. I like less stress in my life. So, and then, while I was praying that, I realized that uh, you don't do that to God. You let God do things. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and But yeah, what drew me to her, out of the many things, but some of the key things were, uh, she was godly, and she really lived in her life in Bangalore, even though she was there for only a brief time, fully well. Like, it was a full life that she lived. It was not like, oh, I'm here just for the period, so I'll just do a few things and then get back home and then live my life there. So that was one thing. But just her, uh, we were part of a cell group, and I could, in that cell group, really see how she was growing, because she would share the things that the Lord is teaching her. So that was an attraction. So there are all of those things in the background. She didn't know about it. And then just before she left, I actually asked her straight up for marriage.
If you know anything about American dating culture,
Yeah.
that is not the way it happens. I literally almost dropped the phone because I was so surprised. Like, I did not see it coming at all.
Yeah, I straight up asked her that, hey, I've been praying about a life partner, praying about marriage, and I wanted to uh, ask if, you know, either, in my mind, I thought she might already have somebody that she's dating, and that would be fine. At least I would know clearly that this is not the way the Lord is leading, and that'll be like a kind of a decision making thing.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So I straight up asked her, hey, would you want to consider our relationship from a marriage standpoint? To which he said, I'll need to think about it. And I said, you absolutely need to think about it. So
Don't give me an answer now.
and we do not know each other from a personal standpoint, right? So we need to start talking to realize, what are our foundational beliefs, because those things matter as we go forward. So long story short, we kept kind of like a stopgap talk for almost
a couple months.
Yeah, a few months. Yeah, about a few months. She took about 3 months to even get here. She was on a cruise, and she wanted to speak to her parents and also her mentors here about this whole thing. And I thought that was all great, because if she came back to the US, discussed, and in her context, if she says that I would like to, explore what this means, I would really take it like an answer from the Lord that, hey, this is His blessing on directing it forward, which is what she did. Honestly, my hopes were not hopes, but my thoughts were that, it's her context, it's her family there. It's just easy for her to marry somebody there and just settle down there. It's just the easy thing. So I did not expect her, honestly. If I'm really truthful, that's what I'll say. I didn't expect her that she would say a yes. But she said that, okay, let's talk. So that's where we started talking, and we kept like a stopgap kind of I think we spoke twice a week, or once a week or twice a week, for about a long time. And then long story short, there was one point where we decided that things are getting serious, because
your parents said,
yeah, that's what. So that's why I said long story short. So my parents, initially they were like, what? And then they reached a point where they said, I don't know what's happening. Like, my sister called me and said that I don't know what's happening, but dad and mom seem to have peace about this. So when that happened, I called up Lydia and said, I don't know what God is doing, but let's talk, because let's kind of talk frequently now, because we need to know if we're going to move forward or not. And things from there went really quick forward. And then I think a year from there, we just got married.
Yeah, that's awesome. Praise God. Funny story from my side. The first time I asked Maya was I actually proposed marriage. That's the same thing happened. Yeah, I actually bought a ring. I bought a ring, which was like silver ring. Really? And I bought her a ring and said, will you marry me? It's like, it didn't even go inside her finger. It was smaller. So she started to put it in a small pinky. things were, I think they were moving in a direction that, I felt it's absolutely crazy. I prayed when I was a young man, Lord, I want to marry a Hindu girl. It's like, I prayed many, many years ago. I didn't even remember it. After many years after marriage, it's like the Lord reminded me, hey, I don't know if you remember. Wow. You prayed for marrying a Hindu girl. And it just so happened that God listened to it, and He answered in His time. It's crazy. And
I mean, I would say that our relationship and our marriage is a testament. Okay, I hear Luke waking up. So Lydia will be just awake for a few minutes.
No problem.
I know our relationship is a testament of the Lord's faithfulness, because there were so many moving parts, but just to see how the Lord has been gracious for us. For us, it's just a testimony of, if not for God, it wouldn't have happened. And I'm not just saying this because it were good things that just happened, but just there are some things that that in all likelihood this would not happen. But if if the Lord's blessing is on this, then it could, and there were a lot of scenarios. Lydia's parents could not come for the wedding till the last moment, and suddenly they can. And there were multiple things that came up. My parents having peace about this, which was a shocker to me. Also from a background that I think they have known of some marriages, cross-cultural marriages, that have not worked out. So that adds on the anxiety towards it. Yeah, so I know I might have rambled a little bit, but that's pretty much.
No, not at all. And one of the statements that you make, which is so true, is when the Lord's hand is on it, things either move fast or sometimes they slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for us, the marriage slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
It took us, I know you probably know this, it took us like 6 years to get married.
Mm-hmm.
From the time I actually told yes to Maya, told yes to me, and then it took us. So sometimes it slows down, sometimes it moves fast. So I'll give you an example. Is like, we said a lot, are we ready to buy a house? And he said yes. 40 days,
Mm-hmm.
what, 20, 35 days, we already have a commitment to a house. So fast. And so yeah, those two things kind of wonderfully. Yeah. So how has it been, at least from your perspective, we can get Lydia's perspective, in terms of this cross-cultural setup, as you've begun your journey? How many years has it been now? You guys are married?
This is the 6th year.
6th year, right? Yeah.
Just in about 2 weeks. June 30th. Yeah, June 13th is our date.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good. June 30th is my mom's birthday, so I'll never forget it now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it has been a huge blessing. So the question, by the way, Lydia just came. So the question, do you want to repeat the question just so that she also?
Yeah, the question is, cross-culturally, how has it been? I'm sure you guys are discovering still. Maya and I got married, it's almost 13 years. I'm still discovering. So I'm sure you guys are discovering certain aspects, right? So how has it been for you guys?
Well, I would say one of the things that when I looked at it from, the husband, the head of the home, that standpoint, one of the things that was strong in my mind is, if this marriage needs to fall apart, we can give many reasons for it. We can call it cross culture. We can call it, different ideologies, different worldviews. You can do all of that. So when I stepped into this marriage, one of the things in my mind was that if there is a conflicting situation, put yourself in the other person's shoe and then look at the situation. Just so that you understand that perspective and then you approach it. And that has helped me a lot. And this is something that I got as an advice, and that has helped me a lot, and I think us a lot as we look at marriage. And I think one of the foundational things we set up in our marriage was, it's not about me, her, or us. It's about how do we foster the gospel in our lives, right? And every day is a testimony of that. And having said that, I wouldn't say that we have not had our challenges. We have had days where that are the typical typical things in marriage, like some days are busy, some days are tough. Children bring in another dynamic to it. So all of those aspects have been there. But I think just being believers and looking at Christ getting the preeminence in our lives is the most important thing, and not me winning, her winning, and also consciously look at marriage that we don't take each other for granted. I would say that has helped a lot in our marriage. But I would love to hear what you want to say.
Going off what you said, I think we kind of had an upper hand in some ways because it's so obvious that our cultures are different. Like, I know American couples, one person is from the East Coast, one person from the West Coast. They don't think about the fact that they have cultural differences because they're both American. But there's actually a big difference.
Huge.
And but I think because for us, it's like, oh, well, you're marrying an Indian. Like, you have to think about this. So we over communicate on a lot of things that other couples may not even think about it, because there are so many differences in from how cooking goes to how to host to how to put a baby down to sleep. Like, there's a lot of those kind of things that I have had to say to myself, does it really matter? Like, does it really matter what song we sing to the baby when he's going to sleep. It doesn't really matter. Like his life is not going to change that much if he hears an American lullaby versus a Malayalam lullaby. Does that make sense? So there are a lot of those kind of things that I think over time there are some things I'm like, you know what, it doesn't really matter. Some things he's like, it's okay, I'm gonna let this slide and we'll do it your way.
But the fact is, and I'm going to interrupt here, but the fact is the baby sleeps better with a Malayalam lullaby.
That is true. That's true. So I've had to learn that.
Oh God.
But yeah, there's just a lot of those kind of things that I suppose it's like that in most marriages. You have to just consciously say, it doesn't have to be my way. Right. Which is really hard. That's part of the reason why I think marriage is so sanctifying and why it's so hard in the first few years. When you're learning to live with somebody, you're learning to communicate with somebody on such an intimate level. You're going to have to give up some things, but not foundational things. So that's where I think that it was really awesome that we had such our relationship was so long distance. That was a blessing, actually. When we were on our calls, like after 5 minutes of, so how was work? And then what? So we kind of like, we had a lot of good practice in talking and really like thinking through what do we actually think about how finances should be managed, or tell me about your parents. What are they like when they're together? What about your brother? What about your sister? Like we talked about so many things that were foundational in the beginning.
And I'll just like to add on, I think we also have, well, from one standpoint, cross-culture can create a lot of challenges. I think the other standpoint is because it is cross-culture, that you can take the best of both worlds and put it all together. True. So for example, and this is not the greatest example, but our food can be a mix of Southern fried chicken with rice and okra, or so it can be something as simple as that, to deciding that, hey, should the baby sleep in a crib or on the bed? And we can actually see what is best in both cultures, and just because we have two different perspectives, we can just see what works better. I remember somebody telling me, and this will always be in my mind, and when I told one of my really good friends, who's a strong believer, that Lydia and I are planning to get married, he encouraged me by saying that, hey, me and my wife, we are Tamilians, so the debates we might have will be about big rice or small rice. The debates y'all will have will be about bread or rice. But that's all that there is. It's going to be, as long as you're going to focus on Christ being glorified in the relationship, you will sort. So, and he was saying a lot of that because I was genuinely concerned about cross culture before getting married, and he was an encouragement from that standpoint.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to hear you guys talk. So you're saying the foundation is the same, which is Christ and the gospel and the good news, right? So when you start to look at behavioral preference and what you've grown up with in terms of context, they're different.
Right.
And it's not going to be different in heaven, right? So if you read Revelation, you see that every nation, tongue, and tribe was there. So that difference is there. And sometimes we put unnecessary pressure to just make everything the same.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But God values the difference, but we get tripped up about the difference, right? So how do you balance between, so as you said, Lydia, you said that's not as important, but this, is more important than that, right? So how do you guys evaluate and judge based on issues around what's fundamental and what's, compromisable, if there's a word like that?
You want me to go?
That's a good question. Yeah, you go ahead. Sure.
Well, I think, and this is something from the New City Catechism. One of the questions is, what is our hope in life and death? And if I remember right, the answer was that we are not our own, but we belong body and soul to Christ. I think if we look at making our new family after marriage a better version of our earlier family from a cultural standpoint, I think that would create a lot of rift because your objective is culturally fitting everything to make things best.
Mm.
Problem is there's another person coming in who has a different culture altogether, and there's always a rift. I think in our marriage, the foundation is that we love God, that we are faithful in what we do, and we foster the gospel as a culture in our family. That's
Mm.
foundation.
Mhm.
Everything else can be either the American version or the Indian version or a mixed version. Uh, do we put kids early to sleep at 7:38 or like an Indian family do it at 10:30, 11? I feel it doesn't matter. It in the whole scheme of things, it doesn't matter. But we really prioritize and focus on what matters. And I hope our kids also understand that
Mhm.
these are 5 or 7 things that really matter to us as a family. And over and above that, you know, explore, be adventurous,
Mhm.
do however you want to do it. And I think, and especially when you look at the disciples, right? Each of the disciples that Jesus had different personalities. Peter had a very he was vigorous and had a leadership kind of a role, whereas you'll find another disciple who was like, like John, I'll rather sit back. I'm not going outside. I'm going to sit back and write something. I think there is merit in all of that, but by keeping the foundation intact. So I think that's what I would answer to your question. But
I would
Lydia.
say on top of that though, there are a lot of things that we've consciously chosen to do, us like because we're living in an Indian context, we have chosen to do some things more Indian, if I can put it in those terms. Not necessarily because it's better or worse, but because that's the community that we're living in. And we want to be all things to all people in some sense.
Mm.
Not that we're trying to please others or fit into other people's box, but if there's a way that I can host people in our home to make them feel comfortable, well, it's probably going to make them more comfortable if I do things at least a little bit Indian. Like I should
Mm.
at least bring a cup of water. Like there's just small things like that I think that we've purposefully chosen to do. And even like there might be even slight differences in the way that we function when we lived in Delhi versus when we moved to Bangalore. And I've even seen since we've been here in the US for this month and a half, there have been things that Joby has um like he's kind of done things a more American way because that's kind of how it's
Mm.
done. Not
Mm.
because it's a right or wrong issue, but just like that's the way it's done. And it's okay. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I can summarize that, I think, and I tell this to some of my brothers to, at church or in the study, I say it's important that we have a high view of God and a lower view of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's just important. That's the only way this will work. The moment that flips and we have a higher view of ourselves and a lower view of God, I feel in marriage or in anything, it'll just create. So,
That's a great point, actually. I was thinking, as you guys were thinking, the summary in my head is, Jesus always focused on the other,
Yeah.
right? My economics professor used to say, hey, whenever you think about others, you think of 70 them and 30 you. Just flip the
Yeah.
balance a little bit,
yeah.
right? And that's a very he was a Christian, he was a Catholic. His name was Chandi. He was in St. Philomena's, right? So St. Philomena's, the college
Yeah.
Yeah.
where I grew up, where I studied, and he would say, always think about the other person as 70 and then 30, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So it's Jesus's principles, right? Love others as you love yourself, and but we'll never understand that unless we understand how the Father has loved us through Christ and has given us His Holy Spirit, right? So That's awesome. So I'm sure you guys face challenges. What were some of the fundamental challenges that you faced before and after, right? So I'm sure, I don't know, so, yeah, before marriage and after marriage, right? So some of the fundamental issues that you've kind of spoken about, or you've kind of processed through. Maya and I have had tremendous fundamental challenges because we grew up in completely different contexts. We're not Christian context, right? So I grew up in a fully Christian context. My dad is a pastor. She grew up in a fully Hindu context. It was anti-Christian. So we had to work through a lot of foundational, fundamental level issues, right? It took us quite a number of years actually before marriage and after marriage. But I don't know if you guys have. I know contextually it's different, India, US, but gospel, uncle. I know uncle's, faith and the way he lived, right? I know a little bit about Joby's dad, the way he lived. But did you guys process through some, or was that not too much?
Well, from a pre-marriage point of view, we didn't have time to have challenges because all our conversations were all our conversations were online, in fact, because we didn't have time physically with each other. And since we had only a brief time, like about 1.5 years before marriage, we kind of needed to know each other. And so we went through there's this renowned Bible teacher who has a few questions about marriage. So, and he has about 50 questions to ask before getting married. We didn't answer just those questions, but if that question was about finance, we kind of touched everything with regards to finance. If the question was regard to who leads the family, then we would touch everything about that, go through that. So I think our pre-marriage was all about understanding each other, and that was an essential part of us even getting married, because I think if we were very different, I don't think we would have gotten married to each other. Also, because since we were not physically close to each other, the infatuation side also was now very strong. We loved each other for sure from that standpoint, but we had a better chance of getting away from each other because we were not physically with each other, but more online talking and discussing. What would you say about?
It is actually kind of funny how our families actually do seem similar, but I think the two things that stand out to me that like his family functions differently than mine is probably in the area of like what kind of all is together, but in the area of like how finances are done. Like I don't want to say every Indian family, but money is pretty fluid in the extended Indian family. Like if brother needs to borrow some money, no big deal, you transfer it and he'll transfer it back. Or if so-and-so is going for an operation, they don't have the money yet, like you give and take, and it's not mine. Does it make sense? I think that's a difference versus Indian and American. And I think also just the concept of individuality in America. I did not think of myself as very individualistic, but the longer that we've been married and the longer I've been in Indian culture, I realize that is a very distinctly American value, to be individualistic and to be independent. Like, I'll take care of it myself. I don't need you to be butting into my business.
Right.
I think I think that I noticed a lot of that, the individualism come in when I was like, before we even started talking to each other, just in my daily life in India, noticing that about other families and about with the girls that I met on campuses and stuff. But I think that those are probably the two distinct things that I would say are different.
Yeah, and I think
from American Indian.
Even from a communication point of view, we have had to work on what does the other person understand better. Both of us are talking in English, but the other person understand, and I think those are areas that initially. I wouldn't, by the grace of God, it didn't end up being like a huge challenge, but we saw gaps where we had to proactively ask the other person, what did you exactly mean by that?
Yeah.
So Lydia's dad says something. When somebody says, "Can we do this?" So Lydia's dad asks, "Is it you we, or me we?" Right? Are you meaning that when you say we, that you should be doing this, or together let's do this, or I should be doing this at some point? So I think those things, the communication aspect of it, and we're still learning.
Yeah.
Lydia sometimes says, "I'll be back in a minute," and I kind of literally sometimes take it as a minute, when actually she means
maybe
that
five,
maybe 5 minutes,
10.
maybe 10 minutes. So yeah, and I'm sure Lydia has things about me too, where I say that, hey, this, and then what she meant is not what I meant is something, and she understood something else. So
And I think there's also like this is not necessarily Indian or American, but some families function in a very straightforward, like, this is what I need, this is what we're talking about, like, let's be very open and honest, no matter how angry or frustrated anyone gets. We're family, we're going to love each other through it.
Yeah.
Some families, especially Southern American families, are like passive aggressive. Oh, everything's fine. When actually I'm really frustrated with you right now. So like there's that kind of dynamic that we've had to like figure out.
Yeah.
And I think, it's kind of a part of marriage.
Yeah,
learning how the other one talks.
Yeah.
That is
those are
sorry,
something.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying those are some things that are top of mind when you ask that question.
Right. No, I'm a process guy, right? In operations, in the work, in the place that I work, there's something called as data, right? And there's something called as metadata, right? I don't know if you understand I'm sure you guys understand that, right? So that metadata defines actually the data, right? So it is data about data,
right?
And that metadata is driven by culture. So communication, though it's data, as you said, you can speak in English, but there's meta, right? That understanding of that meta takes time before, and context, and that engagement, because there's something called as mapping within that data and metadata. Sometimes the data might carry different metadata, and you have to kind of map. Right? That's what's happening in communication. Essentially, when you don't really catch one another, really don't understand one another, it's kind of not. It's really not about the data, but it's about the metadata that's kind of driving some of that communication gap. And same is the case with Maya and I, right? Similarly, we've had some deep communication challenges in the first, I'd say, 3 years. It was it's horrific. I used to blow up quite a bit. I was an angry guy. Joby, you might not believe it, but but a lot of that stuff was coming out. God was using her to sanctify me in some sense, and communication was a big challenge because we didn't communicate well at all, and we just carried on with the communication styles that we had. So I'm glad to hear that it's not a big issue, but it was an issue, but you guys are working through that. That's awesome.
And I think a lot of it is Lydia was being very gracious to me when when I was not talking her language, and I'm hoping that I was also gracious to her. And that kind of ensures that it doesn't become a bigger issue than it really is. Because when two sinners come together, we should expect communication issues, because we came from two different backgrounds, and
that's right.
I think just that whole concept that I mentioned about, now it's not about me and you who's winning. Right. We are on the same team.
That's exactly. We had to remind myself of that. He's not on the opposite team. We're on the same team. We're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's pull back and evaluate, like, why am I thinking that you're opposing me?
Yeah.
Right. The fascinating thing is, I do this triangle at workplace. I say there's a strategy, meaning you want to know where you want to get to.
Right.
There's a structure, who is going to do what. And then there's a culture. How do you do this? And most of the time we get tripped up in not where we want to go. Hey, we want to be like Christ, we want to be sanctified, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not who is going to do it. We're already, the word of God kind of defines some of those roles and responsibilities, all that. But how? That's where we get kind of tripped up, right? In terms of how do we do this stuff is essentially where not just individuals and families, I think also in companies, it has a, I don't know, Joby, you probably are working and you kind of see that same challenge even at your workplace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And but when you look at marriage, right, at workplace, maybe you can just stay silent and get away from that situation. But in marriage, it doesn't work that way. You don't get away anymore. You're in the same house. If it's not today, it's tomorrow. So you need to sort it out. And I'm glad that need to sort out is an important aspect, because it's part of sanctification. It's part of me realizing where I fall short to be like Christ, because Christ is the ultimate head. And while I try and resemble him, I see how I fall short of that too, right? So yeah.
Thank you, friends. Hope you enjoyed that section. This is first of 2 episodes, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you guys the second episode of this continued conversation with Joby and Lydia. It was wonderful. It was a joyful moment for me to listen to their conversation. I really loved every aspect of that conversation. Marriage, as I think I mentioned in the intro, that it's really the foundation of joy of 2 people coming together as one, and forms the basis for the foundation of shaping our kids and the next generation and for society overall, right? So Maya and I have been married for 14 years. We've known one another for 21 years. It's almost more than 50% of my life I've known my wife. And it's been a joy and a pleasure to really participate in a deep friendship in marriage. So hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. If you have anything, reach out to us through our website. It's www.sharethewell.community, or you can leave us a comment in the platforms that you use for airing your podcast. So have a good one. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys next week.